Right now. Next is right now. It's not next year, it's right now. And so what I'm going to be talking about today is really the 2-year vision that we really sense God inviting us into as a church. As Tommy said, if this is your first time ever to Mission, you picked a good one to come to. You're going to hear where we believe God is leading us. And before I really talk specifically about Next is Now and what this means, I want to take us on a little bit of a journey going way back to the beginning of our church, which isn't really, I guess, too far back because we're only 4.5 years old as a church. But before we were ever in here, some of you only know Mission Church from this space, but there's actually quite a backstory before we ever ended up in here. We started out in my house. There was 22 of us, and we began to dream big about what God would have us do, really in my hometown and a number of our hometowns. And we then grew to about 30 people, and quickly we became this, what we called our launch team. And there was about 30 families or so that were part of the launch team, and we began to meet in Stratford Middle School. Some of you, show of hands, how many remember Stratford Middle School? They have a really nice cafeteria, and that was where we met for an entire summer getting ready to start our church. And this launch team, show of hands, how many of you are on the launch team? I know there's a few of you in the room. Yeah, not many. A few of you. Okay, so you guys are going to remember this. We were getting close to our grand opening, which was October 2nd, and I realized that we didn't have chairs for people to sit in. And so you're like, you probably should have figured that out long before grand opening, and you're right, but there was a few other details on my mind. We realized, we actually need chairs. If our friends and neighbors and coworkers come, it'd probably be good for them to have something to sit in. And so at that moment, as our fearless lead pastor, I had this decision to make that I could either go out and raise more startup funding to buy the chairs, or I could invite our launch team into shouldering the burden with me and really have us buy the chairs. And so thankfully, I went this direction. It turned out to be a really powerful thing for us. And so I shared with our launch team, hey, we're about 2 weeks away or so from our grand opening. I think you'd agree with me that we probably need chairs for our friends to sit in. So I need you to buy some chairs. I need you to buy some chairs. And those of you that just raised your hand that were on the launch team, every time you see these black chairs, they don't represent just a chair, do they? It represents an era in our church when there's just a few of us. And it represents a time in our church where we said, you know what, we're all in. It represents a time in our church where we said, God, we believe you can do the impossible when a chair is occupied with a friend who needs to understand mercy and grace. And so we went big. A number of people bought a few chairs. John Frank at the time, he bought, I think, 2 rows of chairs, John and Tiffany, because his family's so big and because he used to make a lot of money. But we changed all that when we invited him on our staff. Yeah, it doesn't anymore. And you guys remember grand opening? Brian's here. You guys remember that? When we saw people sitting in these chairs. No one was asleep on that Sunday in these chairs. And we got to witness a church being born. First time in my life I've ever seen a church born. October 2nd, 2011. And we have seen God do the impossible in occupied chairs ever since. We've seen God do incredible, incredible things. We were off and running after October 2nd. We continued to set up chairs and heavy stage decks. We had this volunteer team. They were called our truckers. Show of hands, how many of you were a trucker at one point in our church? God bless you. Some of you are like, what's a trucker? You're part of our church when it's like really easy to be part of our church, and I'm going to fix that here in about 30 minutes. But our truckers, I see Ed and Russ is probably in here somewhere. These guys, they were our truckers, and we had a whole group of people. They would wake up at 4:15 in the morning every Sunday. They would drive to where we stored 3 of our trailers that held our entire church, not the people, they didn't live in there, but all the equipment. And in the winter, they would snow blow around the trailers, they would shovel the snow off, and they'd pull those trailers, and we'd set up church. And every single weekend, that's what we did. Remember, we had those trailers, but then there was this one weekend where they went to pull the trailers, and our main trailer that held most of our church equipment had been stolen. How many of you guys remember when our church got stolen? Yeah. And so we showed up that Sunday, and there was nothing really there. And that was a defining moment in the history of our church because we said this vision has never been built on a space. We'll meet in an open field if we have to. We are the people of God on the move. We are the church. Wherever our 2 feet take us, that's where the church just showed up. And yeah, they stole it. Hopefully they'll return it. But if they don't, God is going to continue to build his church, and he did. He did. God did amazing things in this era that we would call the Stratford Middle School era. Show of hands, how many of you were part of our church in the Stratford Middle School era? Yeah, a whole bunch of us. Wouldn't you guys kind of recall pretty quickly, Mission Kids, how they would set up our kids' ministry in hallways? The school wouldn't give us any classrooms. No matter how much I would beg them, they wouldn't give us any classrooms. So our kids' ministry met in hallways. Our team got really creative. They met in teacher break rooms. They met in sketchy locker rooms. It was sketch, right? We're like, I don't know, what else are we going to do? Transformed a girls' locker room into a space where kids could connect with Jesus. You guys remember this. Setting up the gym week in and week out. I'll never forget the middle school era, mainly because on the gym wall, I don't know how I can describe this, but the best way is there was this demonic-looking horse on the wall with red eyes, right? And imagine me, I'm trying to communicate grace and mercy, and here's this apocalyptic something with these red eyes, like breathing fire. I'm like, grace, mercy, so I'll never forget that challenge as a communicator, as a preacher. But God did amazing things. And I'll never forget this one Sunday where someone told me that someone pulled into our parking lot at Stratford Middle and pulled out because there were no parking spots available. And that news spread, and it broke our hearts. Why? Because we believe when a chair is occupied, God can do great things. Why? Because we've never been about the size of a church. We've always been about the soul of a friend. Why? We've never been about numbers. We've always been about names. And when we saw a friend who pulled into the parking lot and then left because there wasn't a parking spot available, we said, we have to do something now. At that time, we were actually pretty far down the road as a board on looking at purchasing a property, and we felt God give us one of these. He held us up, rounding third. Said, nope, now is not the time for that. And we had spent about 6 months in that, and quickly we began to backtrack. And I'll never forget the day as a board when we were meeting, trying to figure out where we could go next. We'd outgrown Stratford Middle School. Where could we go next? And the board looked at me and they said, John, I think you need to meet with Lake Park West High School again. And I said, I think you're wrong. I'd already done that. And some of you know the story. We tried to start our church in this space, and the school board unanimously voted us down. Not because they're bad people, but they just didn't quite understand what we were trying to do as a church. And I'll never forget walking out of that meeting back in 2010 feeling completely defeated. And that's why I told our board that day there's no chance that I'm going to go back to that board and ask them. But I did. And God moved a mountain. It went from a unanimous no to a unanimous yes. When they looked at me and John and Tommy and Justin, they said, how could we not have your church meet in our school with all the restorative work that you've done in our community? Like, how could we not? Incredible story. Incredible story. And those of you clapping, you're clapping because you remember that moment in the life of our church where we began to realize, man, it matters that we continue to show up. We continue to ask the question, what's missing? We continue to be known by love and grace and blessing our community. It matters. And all of a sudden, then I shared with you guys, all right, we're ready to graduate middle school and to start attending high school. All right? And a number of us went to this very high school. And I shared with you guys, the only way we can do that is for us to do a one-time offering. We need to raise some capital in order to update this facility, and we did. $85,000 was given in one Sunday, and we graduated junior high, and we came here, and we've seen God move in incredible ways in the past year and a half. Show of hands, how many of you started coming to Mission Church just in this space alone? Yeah, keep your hands up for just a second. I want you guys to just take that in. I know it's over 300 people, but that's just a number. I want you to look at these people that we know. And I know their names, C and Eric, the Witts, Caleb. I mean, this is unbelievable. I mean, aren't you glad that we trusted God? Aren't you glad that we didn't settle? Aren't you glad that we said, you know what, we're actually okay that our parking lot's full. I think we're done. But we moved in here expectant for God to continue to do what God has always been doing, that when a chair is occupied with a friend, that the impossible can happen. We've been saying for a long time in our church, every single Sunday, this kind of like, it's like a sports thing, because a lot of us used to be athletes. And so it's this sports thing that we kind of do. And the reason I started it was I wanted to make sure our volunteer army would be on the same page every game day before we start. And it's this, you could call it a chant, but that's already freaking out some of you that are here for the first time. We lock arms as volunteers, and we start swaying back and forth, making a lot of noise, kind of like, it's March Madness, not anymore, but we start going, oh, all right? And then it gets really, really loud, and then someone in the middle, we pick kind of this rally captain, in the middle yells, "We are!" And everyone yells back, "Mission." Yeah, a few of you have done this before. And then the person says, "And we are," and everyone yells back, "Not done." Not done. Okay, so this is what we do every single Sunday. Every single Sunday. We just did it at 8:55. I thought it would be fun. We've never done it in this kind of environment before. I thought it would be fun for all of us to do it, right? And I've got the microphone, and they tell me I'm in charge at times, so I'm going to do it. So I actually have planned for this. Blake Williams is one of our best rally captains. Let's give Blake a round of applause. And we're going to need this mic on. Yep. Blake, are you fit enough for this, though?
I feel prepared.
You feel prepared?
I feel prepared.
All right, so you just kind of, you feel good? You just take this
I feel great.
moment.
All right, so battle cries have been used throughout history, right, to encourage the troops, to rally the troops. So we're all going to rise to our feet. And usually in the morning we put our arms around each other. Today I wanted to actually lock arms because I think there's more strength in locking arms. So reach across aisles, lock arms. Think about how hard the game of Red Rover would be if your arms were locked, right? So there's strength in locking arms. Very good. I see some gaps up there. Fill your gaps in. Very good. All right, so again, John coached you. I'm going to say "we are" once you get loud enough. So first we're going to start a little sway. So let's get a little sway going. Back and forth. Very good. You're going to start giving me some volume now. So let me hear. Oh, there we go.
I got it on video. That's amazing. Wow. Oh, all right, I think we're done. You guys all clear on Next is Now? We're good? Oh, all right, that was fun. I've been wanting to do that for a long time. So Next is Now is a lot of new things, all right, but that's not changing. We are mission. The day we chose our domain name was very intentional, that this would not be a vision based on a personality, that this would not be a vision based on one guy or one girl, that this would be the power of we. Ever since the beginning, this has been the thing. We are mission. Not just a few of us that were here in the very beginnings that remember these chairs, we are mission. That we truly would lock arms, not just one day out of the week, that's 1/7 of the vision, but 7 days a week. That we are mission, and secondly, that we are not done. That's not changing. As long as God gives me oxygen in my lungs, and our board and our staff and our partners and our volunteer leaders, we will not pull up short. How could we? In the 10, there's 262,000 people. The 10, if you're visiting with us, is this beautiful tropical place that a number of us are from, right here in the 10. And a number of you don't live in the 10. That's okay. You invest in the 10 every week by being here and being in group and by serving the community. But the 10 has been our focus. And there's 262,000 people, and on Easter was the biggest weekend we've ever had in our church, just under 1,100 people, which blows my mind, which is incredible, and we should applaud that, truly. On spring break. And I've been applauding God, and I've been saying, God, I can't believe I get to be part of this. And at the same time, God has been reminding me, but continue to remember the 261,000 that are still in this community. Marriages that need to be restored, needs that need to be met, names that need to be added. We are mission. We are not done. That's not changing. And it brings us to Next is Now. I've been working on this for a number of months. Our board has been meeting for over a year, processing and listening and discerning with God. Father, what is our next step as a church? There's a lot of directions we could go. What direction would you have us go? And we've been praying and planning for this, and I've been waiting to talk to you guys about a number of things that we believe God's inviting us into, and really wrapped around this name, Next is Now. Not next year, but right now. Right now. Next is right now. And actually last week, I was working in the morning, and I was asking God, I'm like, Father, would you just help me with how to talk about Next is Now in a way that people can really remember what this is about? Would you help me simplify it? I know what it is, and it moves me deeply. It has for a long time now, but I need your help. And as I was asking God to help me with it, He reminded me of the first song I ever learned in church. It was a song that came equipped with hand motions, which was a huge win for me. These hand motions went like this, and it went like this. And I don't know if you guys know what this song is. I'm not even going to say the name yet. Howie knows it. What would you say, Howie? Yeah, Deep and Wide. Deep and Wide. And here's how it goes. If you remember the song, you can sing along with me. It went something like this. Deep and wide, there's a fountain flowing deep and wide. Let me just hit pause. A bunch of you guys never grew up in church, which you're in the right place, right? You're like, this is weird. But I think all of us could probably catch on. I mean, come on, I learned it when I was 2, all right? So we're just going to try to hop in when you can, all right? It's going to help us remember what Next Is Now is all about. And when it comes to the river, here's what I've learned in the past week. There's a lot of ways you can do this. Grace Ruda did this yesterday. There's a lot of different things, so that doesn't really matter, but it matters that we're here, right? So we're just going to try this on the count of 3 in the key of B, okay? 1, 2, 3. Deep and wide, come on. Deep and wide, there's a fountain flowing deep and wide. Come on, a little bit better. Deep and wide, there's a fountain flowing deep and wide. You guys are amazing, all right? Amazing, phenomenal. Next Is Now is about this. Here's the why, and we're going to start with why. It's about this. It's about us going deeper into the tent. It's about us growing wider to reach more people. It's about deep and wide. It's about us going deeper into the tent. And within this first move, there's 3 moves that we believe we need to make. It's about us going deeper into the 10. 5 years ago, when we were getting ready to start this church, we loved these 10 towns, but we didn't have a name for them. And we felt like God gave us a name for them, and we called them the 10. And I remember telling Tommy, we're going to narrow our focus so that we can deepen our impact. We're not going to try to change the world, but we believe God has called us to partner with Him to bring restoration and healing and meaning and purpose to this little corner of the world. And what could happen over the next 30, 40, 50 years if we continue to narrow our focus? We believe that we could deepen our impact. And we believe that God is saying to us, you're not done in the 10. Over the last year and a half, we've explored a lot of options outside of the 10. And a number of those were really attractive. And this doesn't mean that we won't ever go outside of the 10, but it means right now, God is saying over the next 2 years, you need to go deeper into the 10 in these specific ways. 3 ways specifically. Number 1, to provide an executive director for the 10. To provide an executive director for the 10, and that word provide is on purpose. We see this as a gift to the 10. Over the last 5, almost 4.5, 5 years, we have seen God do unbelievable things through what we call For the 10. Show of hands, how many of you have been part of the Holiday Gift Mart or Project Just Start? A whole bunch of us, right? And we need to get better at those. That's going to come in a number of weeks, all right? We're not done doing those things, but we've seen God do incredible things. Last year alone with Project Just Start, there wasn't an elementary age kid in the 10 that needed a backpack. That's how many backpacks we were able to get funded to be filled. We've seen God do immeasurable things in the 10. You're going to experience the fireworks on July 3rd. That's just one very visible thing. But there's been things that you can't quite see and measure that we've been participating with God on. And for us to provide this executive director for the 10 is an exciting day. All the things that have happened without anyone leading it. And you probably don't know that. I haven't been the leader of it. Right? I just at times wear the hat. John Frank at times has worn the hat. At times Grace Ruda has worn the hat. But imagine what could happen if we had someone waking up, spending the best hours of their day and week leading for the 10. Imagine what could happen. We've yet to have that kind of clarity and focus, and that time has come now. We need it. It's time for someone to spend the best hours of their week helping us going deeper into the 10, and that person is John Frank. Yeah. If you're around here for any length of time, John is a behind-the-scenes guy, and we would not be who we are without him. He left Wall Street to work on Lake Street, and we've seen him do incredible things over the past 3 years as our director of operations. And I met with John a number of weeks ago and just said, John, here's what I believe we need to do. You need to retire from director of operations. We need to move Grace Ruda into that role. She's ready. And you need to take the helm with For the 10, spending the best hours of your week in it. And God has been talking to him about this months in advance, of course, that this would really be his calling and really be his purpose. This moves us into the second P, and that's to pastor the local community. What will John Frank do in this role? He's not just going to provide things that maybe you would call relief kinds of things. We'll continue to do backpacks, and we'll continue to do toys, but I need you to dream bigger than that. We need to get at a higher elevation of what would it look like to pastor the local community? What would it look like to be a bridge builder? In the past 4.5 years, God has given us in the 10 unbelievable influence and trust. It is something only God can do. We've got to better steward that influence and trust. As John and I have been talking about this, he said, John, I want you to imagine a day where business owners and local politicians and other church leaders and superintendents and teachers are all around the same table working in unity, solving the key problems that the 10 has. Can you imagine that? Now, I've only lived here for the past 31 years, okay? So I'm kind of new to town. But I'm telling you, that table has never existed in our community. Some of you that are from here, you know what I'm saying is true. Everyone is divided. Churches don't talk to each other. Organizations don't talk to each other. Everyone just reinvents the same wheel. We need to pastor the local community. We need to steward this trust and influence to get those people around the same table. One of the ways that we can do that is we're going to start by launching a new initiative called the Global Leadership Summit. Now, the Global Leadership Summit comes from the church that I was trained and really mentored in, Willow Creek. But we're bringing the Global Leadership Summit to this very space, the first time in the history of the 10 that the Global Leadership Summit will be in our community, and we're bringing it here in August. And it's something to applaud. It's something to get excited for. You're going to hear more information about this in the first 3 weeks of June, but that is coming. It is coming. And that is one of the ways we believe that we can pastor the local community. John, over the past 4 weeks, has been dipping his toe into the waters of this. Some cool stories that I think will help you understand what I mean by this. Number one, in the past 4.5 years, we've met twice with 2 mayors in the 10. That's it. In the 10, you'd think there's 10 mayors, but there's actually only 9. Medina doesn't have one, but Tommy might run. Okay, so we'll see. There's only 9 right now. But over the past 4.5 years, we've only met twice with 2 mayors. In the past 4 weeks alone, John Frank has met with 5 of them. And he sat down with them not to ask them for something. He sat down with them to give them something. And that was an invitation to come to the Global Leadership Summit. All 5 said yes. And all 5 said, can we bring our staff? Incredible. I want you to think pastor the local community. That's what I mean by that. In addition to that, there's a church in downtown Roselle that is predominantly African American. And I've driven past the church and I've waved at it with my venti Starbucks. That's really the most I've engaged with them. Not because I don't care, but because I don't have time. We have not engaged with them at all. And just a few weeks ago, John sat down with their senior pastor, showed up and gave him a gift saying, hey, I'd love for you to be one of my guests at the Global Leadership Summit. And the guy came unglued. He's like, seriously, we would love to come. Like, can I bring most of my church? And John's like, yes, absolutely. And he said, also, could we partner with you guys on Project Just Start and the Holiday Gift Mart? Yeah, amazing. Phenomenal. Phenomenal. We want to pastor the local community. That has to happen. We've got to better steward our influence and trust. Here's the last story, and I'll move to the third P within us going deeper. This story is so redefining church. And some of you might misunderstand what we mean by redefining church. This will help. When it comes to pastoring the local community, we want to build bridges. And a few weeks ago, John met with me and he said, hey, the 2 biggest churches in the 10 are St. Isidore's and St. Walter's. What do you think I should do about that? I said, well, I think if Jesus were leading for the 10, I think he'd be buddies with those guys. I think you should probably go hang out with them. So he did. And we met with St. Walter's. St. Walter's is just right down the block. I can hit my 8-iron to their auditorium pretty much, all right? And he sat down with Father Mario. Some of you maybe used to go to St. Walter's. And John sat down with him, and John wasn't sure what to expect. And he sat down just like with these other people, offering him a gift, and he said, Father Mario, I'd love for you to be one of my guests at the Global Leadership Summit. And John kind of braced himself. Father Mario went on to say, you've got to be kidding me. For the past 5 years, I've been watching clips on YouTube of the Global Leadership Summit, and you're bringing it to my community. Do I want to go? He's like, yes, I want to go. Can I bring my faculty as well? And John's like, no, not now. Like, well, you got to wait for that. No, he said, yes, you can bring, come on, you can bring everyone. You know, like, this is pastoring the local community, and those stories put skin on what I mean of pastoring the local community. What if we could better steward our influence and trust over these next 2 years? We've got to do that now. We can't wait. The third P, it's to propel us to love where we live. We believe we have a first-round draft pick that can join our staff starting at 30 hours a week to propel you and me to love where we live, and his name is Dan Ruda. He's sitting right over there. This is Dan's passion. He and Grace intentionally sold their house and moved into the 10. They've been seeing the kingdom of God come on Springfield Drive. Most of their neighbors are with them. And we believe it's time for us to bring Dan on our team. Here's why. Before starting this church, I was part of a really big church, large church. And I want you to know something. I didn't leave a really large church to pastor just another big church. Did you know that? When it comes to seeing an awakening and revival, it's not going to take just another big church. Did you know that? Ever since we started this church, I was really clear with the first 22 people. This is about us being the church. And we spent months on what we would name this church. And I want to remind you, we didn't name this church Gather Church, although we do gather, and you're here today. Great job. Truly, great job. But we didn't name it Gather Church. We named it Mission Church. What would it look like for us as a church to continue to love where we live? What will it take? We need someone spending that kind of focus, agitating us, bothering us, equipping us, inspiring us, Dan doing whatever it takes to kick us out of our house and out of our comfortability or out of your corner office to begin to use your influence where you work, where you live, and where you hang out. We got to love where we live. We got to love where we live. And we believe Dan can help us with that. Jason and Christy Amato are sitting over there. What's up, guys? They were part of I think they were like maybe the third or fourth couple to be part of this team. And before we started Mission, they would tell you they didn't really love where they lived. Didn't know many neighbors at all. And what we've seen over the past 4.5 years is Jason and Christy get to baptize a whole bunch of their neighbors. In fact, I think we brought a picture of one of them. There it is behind me. And when I talk about propelling you to love where you live, I want you to see this picture. I would argue 95% of you have never experienced what is behind me, and that is you getting to baptize a neighbor or coworker or family member. And I'm telling you, you are missing out on so much of what it feels like to be on mission and to be in the family of God. I want that for you. I want that for you. And I'm dreaming of the day when this picture actually becomes the norm in our church. Not the exception. Not the exception. We got to go deeper into the 10. And that moves us to this part, right? You remember the song. It's not just deep, it's also wide. For us to grow wider by reaching more people. We don't want to be an either-or church. We want to be a both-and. And the first move that we believe that we need to make within this is for us to prepare for our next move. Prepare for our next move. You would agree that if you start to prepare for your next move when you need to make your next move, you've waited too long, right? That applies in every discipline of life. If you wait to prepare for your next move when you need to make your next move, you've waited too long. We believe God is saying to us at a board and staff level, it's time to prepare for your next move. If you haven't noticed, this place is filling up, and we need to fill it up, and I believe we will over the next 2 years. But we got to prepare for our next move. We got to prepare. We got to get ready for that through savings. Some of you right now, you are filled with a whole lot of questions around that, and I guarantee you I have more questions on what preparing for our next move really looks like. Some of you might be thinking, John, does this mean that we're going to then launch another high school kind of location in the 10? There's 4 high schools in the 10, and I would say that's a good idea. Some of you might say, I bet he's talking about us buying property and building something. That's a good idea too. Some of you might be thinking, I think I know what our next move is going to be. It's going to be an existing church that maybe isn't utilizing their facility like they did one day, maybe them giving us their church or selling it to us for a very reduced cost. That's a good idea as well. Here's the truth. We don't know. And I know as the leader, I'm supposed to always know. I don't know. And if you'd have told me 2 years ago that we'd be having this conversation in this auditorium, I would have told you that you were absolutely out of your mind. And so God has reminded us as a board and as a staff and as partners, we got to stay like this. We got to trust that God is on the move, that He is way out in front of us, that He's preparing what our next move needs to be. The question is, will we be ready? We need to be ready. We got to prepare for our next move. Moves into the second part of how we're going to grow wider by reaching more people, and that is for us to position our weekends to reach more people. We have to do that. Specifically, we got to increase the operating budget of Mission Kids. Show of hands, how many of you have a child that is not yet in junior high? Show of hands. Yep, a whole bunch of us. On Easter, there's 212 kids. Last weekend, 202. We can't take our foot off the gas pedal with Mission Kids. We got to increase the operating budget. We've got to put ourselves in a position where we can serve and reach more families. In addition to that move, we need to hire a full-time worship pastor. That doesn't mean that Tommy is going anywhere. He's our executive pastor. We made that move about 6 months ago. He manages our staff. He helps set strategy once we come up with these kinds of things to keep us on track. But we need someone that can build this worship ministry, building into our bands, taking that to the next level where we can continue to put on weekends where you would actually want to invite your neighbors or friends. We got to do that. We got to position our weekends to reach more families and to serve more families. Here's the last move within us growing wider to reach more people. It's to prioritize the next generation. It's to prioritize the next generation. I've wanted to make this move for quite some time, and I wasn't allowed to. There's actually a lot of accountability in our structure. It wasn't the time. And we've been doing good work with our junior hires and high schoolers because we have some amazing volunteer leaders, but we need to move from good to great. And the way we're going to move from good to great is by us launching a full-scale student ministry. Right? I mean, like, the time has come for that. You know, and he's sitting 4 rows deep. Isaac, I'm going to embarrass you real quick. But for months, what God has been, this just lit this on fire for me. He's a freshman at Lake Park. Before he graduates, he's going to know what it feels like to be part of a dynamic youth ministry. He will. And the only way that's going to happen is for us to hire a full-time youth pastor. We're ready for this. We got to make that play. Jess and Mike Merrill have been doing a great job. Oh my gosh, that's not even their jobs though. Their jobs is Mission Kids. And they've been taking one on the chin because I've asked them to for the past number of months now. We need to hire a full-time youth pastor. In addition to that, we need to fund an operating budget where our youth know that they are right in the center focus of our church. It's time for us to prioritize the next generation. They are the future. They are the future. If you just look at the 10 alone, there's 4 high schools. Add in a couple of our neighboring high schools. Some of your kids will go there. And you're looking at over 10,000 high school students alone. Add in junior hires. You take that number from 10,000 close to 18,000. Researchers tell us this, that between the ages of 4 and 14, 85% of the people say yes to Jesus in that age range. Show of hands. How many of you between the ages of 4 and 14 said yes to Jesus? Just show of hands. Exactly. How could we not play the most offense in that age range? We're going to. We have to. We got to make these hires. We believe God has given us this plan. Next is now is about us going deeper into the 10. It's about us growing wider by reaching more people. And if we pull them all on the screen at the same time, you see all 6 of these moves, and that leads you to the question of, well, how are we going to do that? And I'm glad that you asked. You guys are smart. You've already realized that this isn't free. I've searched for a Groupon on this, and there isn't one, which I was a little disappointed in that. Over the past, number of weeks, I had a neighbor of mine build something, and Tommy and Dustin, I think you're going to help reveal what's behind these cloths. My neighbor, his name is Tom. Maybe a couple of you guys have met Tom, but he's spent hours and hours and hours building this for me. And as we've been meeting as a board, as we've been thinking about, well, how is this actually going to happen? How do we fund this? Here's how we're going to fund this, we believe. It's to see 300 families or individuals increase their current giving by $150 a month over the next 2 years. That's how. It took 30 families to start the church. It's going to take 300 to move it forward. Will you be part of the 300? And I met with my neighbor, Tom, and I just had this vision. You know, Jesus says that we're the light of the world. I don't know if you know that. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if as every family or individual responds to this campaign over the next 3 weeks, they turn in their commitment card, they set it up online so we know that they're totally in. Every time that happens, we screw in a light bulb. And in the 3, there's 100 spots for 100 light bulbs, and in the 0, there's 300 spots. And here's what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to be part of the 300. There's 3 groups of people in our church, just like in every church. There's group number 1 that you don't give yet, right? So you give currently 0. That doesn't make you a bad person. That probably makes you a new person, okay? So hear me on this. Just makes you a new person. You're new to the faith. This move right here is terrifying. I get that. Or you're new to our church, right? You're still kicking the tires. But we need you to be all in. I need you to move from 0 to 150. We currently have 200 giving units, so we got a lot of ground to cover here. And one of the ways we believe we can get there is by this group. If you're in that group, we need you. There's a myth in church that someone else will do it. That actually doesn't work in this case. We need you. I need you to go all in. If you're in camp number 1, I need you to move to 150. Some of you over here, you're in group 2, you give something, and generosity is kind of, starting to catch on, and you're really thinking about it, and you're paying attention to it. You wouldn't say that you give 10% of your income yet. You're not a tither yet, but you're moving towards that. I need you to move wherever you're at in group 2 to add $150 per month over the next 2 years. I need you to do that. I need you in that. In group 3, I'm in group 3. We don't get to sit out. And I thought a lot about this, actually. But we give faithfully, and we tithe, and we give sacrificially. We need to be part of this too. I'm asking you to sacrifice perhaps like you've never sacrificed before. For you to increase your giving by $150 a month over the course of the next 2 years so that we can do these 6 things, so we can fund them. We're asking you to start this funding on May 1st, for you to take the next 3 weeks to pray about it, to ask God about it. I'm praying, and I'm believing that here over the next few weeks that we see this whole thing lit up. Kelly and I, we've been praying about this because we've known about it, and we have invited God into this conversation. God, what would you have us do? And as we've prayed and as we've thought and as we've talked about it, God's been clear with us on how many light bulbs we need to do. And what helped us get to this point was this picture that I've had of there's a day down the road where Hannah and Hallie, they come to my office because they love coming to my office, where this marquee is no longer in here, but it's in our office. And I take Hannah and Hallie, and I walk them by the hand. Probably they're older, and I can't do that anymore, so I just kind of ask them to come over this way. And I take them to those 2 light bulbs. I say, I want you to look at these 2 light bulbs. These represent Hannah and Hallie. And back in April 2016, Hannah and Hallie, your mom and I were funders of your youth ministry that is now impacting and changing your life and the lives of your friends. We gave. We went big. We gave to the degree that it increased our faith, and we saw God show up in our church in a historic way. Most of you were not part of these days. Well, guess what? You get to be part of these days. And 10 years from now, I promise you, you will look back on this era of our church, and you get the opportunity to say, we were part of that. We were funders of Next Is Now. We were investors in seeing our church go deeper into the tent and grow wider by reaching people. Our band is going to play a couple songs right now, and as they start, here's what I'm asking every single person to do. I'm asking you to get up for wherever you guys are at and approach one of the 4 tables. It's where communion usually is. And I'm asking you to take one of our commitment cards. This isn't you saying you're in today, but it's you having the information that you need. And so as they start playing the song, God is Able, I want you to get up from where you're seated. I want you to grab one of these commitment cards, go back to your seat, stay standing, and join in with the band as they lead us in worship. Father, thank you for how faithful you are in leading us as a church. And God, I pray that your Spirit would move powerfully right now, that you would speak to our hearts, that you would fire us up, God, that you would convince us that you are able, that we can trust you with this increase. And God, I pray a mountain move kind of prayer. We've seen you do it before, and we're asking you to do it again. We love you, God, and we completely commit this initiative in these 2 years unto you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you for watching Mission Church Online. It's our prayer that this message both challenged and inspired you. We hope you will join us in redefining what church could be in your life by taking a next step. Whether that's sharing this message with a friend, joining us live next Sunday, or requesting prayer by emailing us at prayer@wearemission.com. We believe that these are moments that can lead to movement.